Welcome everyone to the Atomic Cinema Experiment. I am Peter, and joining me as always is Tara.
Greetings, citizens.
And this is our science fiction movie podcast where we get together, we watch a sci-fi movie and we talk about it. And we're finally crossing off a film here this week that was on our radar for a little bit, and we just kind of had to find time to squeeze it in. And it's a film called Synchronic, which is from Justin Benson and Aaron Moorhead, who we have brought up before on this show. We did a film of theirs called The Endless a long time ago now. That was probably quite early in the show's history at this point. And I've also seen a film by theirs called Spring, which I brought up a few times when we reviewed that. So this is my third go-round with this directing duo. Your second go-round. Well, unless you...
Yeah, we also reviewed their episode of Twilight Zone, which is kind of like a short film, I guess.
I'm not going to hold them accountable for their episodes, because most of those episodes were terrible, so I'm not holding them accountable for that.
Do you see what's coming up next on their agenda?
I did. They are directing seemingly all 6 episodes of Moon Knight, the MCU show.
They got him. Disney got them.
I you know what? They made the connection with Anthony Mackie in this movie, and like Anthony Mackie's like, hey, I'm going to recommend.
Dropped a business card on Feige's desk.
I'm going to recommend this duo. Although they're directing with a third person, there's 3 directors on Moon Knight. So I wonder if they're genuinely co-directing all 6 episodes, or if they're actually all doing like 2 each kind of thing, where they're mostly rotating through on set, as it were. I don't know. Maybe not. I have no idea.
I don't know. I mean, I think they've always been co-directors.
Yeah. No, all the work has, as far as I know, up until this point. So, hey, what is Synchronic, you may ask? We all start spoiler-free, of course, but the basic premise, and this is all I knew about it going in. This is because honestly, I was a little worried to get into this, because I'd seen it labeled as sci-fi, and it sounded slightly sci-fi, but I wasn't actually sure how sci-fi it was. And it's about this designer drug that's going around called Synchronic, and Anthony Mackie and the dude from 50 Shades of Grey are paramedics, and they're encountering the aftermath of some of these like drug trips gone wrong, and that's kind of your first sort of section of the movie. And it's just playing out, and I'm like, okay, this is it's a pretty solidly made film so far. It's doing some interesting things, but in the back of my head, I was like, well, if this gets to the end and I feel like it barely qualifies as sci-fi, and I'm going to be like, oh shit. Needless to say, it definitely goes full science fiction at a certain point in the movie.
Totally.
So, have no fear. I do think it's a spoiler to say how it becomes science fiction, but rest assured that if you're only watching the spoiler-free part of this review, it does go full sci-fi. So, do not fear. Do not fear.
I was never worried, because I think all of their films are sort of sci-fi adjacent, aren't they? I mean, Endless, obviously, but...
Nah, Spring, I'd say, is more like mythological, like horror mixed with romance. So there's not really science fiction in that, but that's certainly a genre piece. It's not.
Yeah.
So,
and I think their first film is just 2 guys in a cabin, which maybe is a horror thing, but I thought that they were also in The Endless, so like those worlds are connected. So I was thinking maybe there's a little bit of sci-fi there. I don't know. No,
it's definitely. I've not seen that movie. That's the one film of theirs I've not seen, but it's definitely sci-fi, because the whole concept of that those 2 character stories are stuck in some sort of weird time bubble / loop. So,
well, in The Endless it is, but is that the case in that movie also? Is it Resolution or something?
Yeah, Resolution. Well, I assume so. I assume it's at least hinted at in that movie, because I mean that's like it's not. I mean they're trapped in that, but like yeah, yes. Why would you think it's anything else?
Because I haven't seen it.
Well, nor have I, which is why I'm just like, that's what they say up in that movie. I don't know
if they were like an Easter egg in their third film, or if they were like, this is a continuation of that story in a way.
Oh no, it's
that story from another perspective.
No, it's definitely, it is in continuity with that movie. It's not, it's just like complete. Technically, The Endless is kind of a sequel of sorts.
Okay.
So
it's been a while since we talked about it. I'm sure we brought it up, but I don't remember. We skipped it. We didn't watch that. If we were supposed to watch them in order.
Well, yeah, because I was not informed it was the follow-up to another movie. Technically, I mean it's very standalone.
True. They didn't call it part 2.
But had I known, I would have made us watch the other one first. Had I known, and we should probably still go back and watch Resolution at some point. But Anywho, Synchronic. We have to talk about Synchronic. What did you think?
I think it's pretty good. It's definitely their easiest. I mean, compared to The Endless, it's a lot easier to follow what's happening I'm really glad that the directors are not acting in this one because I think that was a downside of watching The Endless. They were good in it, for a low budget indie film, but they were also surrounded by actors, and you can kind of tell. But in this one, you get professional guys. They're great. I think the chemistry between Anthony Mackie and Jamie Dornan, does that sound right?
That's correct.
Is pretty good. Like, I buy them as friends. I think some of the like more monologue-y speeches or like storytelling scenes kind of come off a bit awkward, but maybe that's just a writing thing because they're very good actors. But as far as the sci-fi ideas go, it's just like with The Endless, I thought the ideas were interesting, and so there's only so much I could say without the spoiler section, but I am still looking forward to the next thing they do.
Okay, yeah. So I like Spring quite a bit. Now, admittedly, the horror element of it was by far the weakest part, and just the raw romance was very, very good. The Endless, I kind of agree with you. The ideas were really solid. I kind of dug a lot of what it was doing, but I wouldn't say overall it's a film that I loved because of just how rough it was around the edges. I think this... I'd have to go back and watch Spring again to really sort of say which one I prefer, but I do think this is a better movie than The Endless. I think it's a bit more refined, and part of that maybe because they're not acting it themselves and they've got actual actors. And for the record, Jamie Dornan has way better chemistry with Anthony Mackie than he ever did with the female lead of 50 Shades of Grey.
I'll have to take your word for it.
Yes, I have seen 2 of those so far. I'm not happy about it. I'm not proud of it.
Mm-hmm.
But I have, and they have no chemistry in that movie. So it was odd seeing him come off as a natural human being that wasn't written as some weird, creep. to put it simply.
I'm sure he would agree with you. I don't think he's fond of those films either, but he's fond of money.
That does not surprise me. I think that's fair. I obviously Anthony Mackie's the main star though. I mean, it sort of starts off as a duo, but it kind of really becomes his film the more it goes on. He's definitely the lead character. And this movie, much like The Endless, plays with some sort of weirder ideas where some of the visuals we get and some of the way, just right from the start of the film, the effects we get and when we see what happens to people who are taking this drug and what they see, and we see it from their perspective, we get a lot of very interesting and diverse visuals, kind of dreamlike, but with a specific kind of type of dreamlike. But obviously, as it goes on, we get more context for actually what's happening. But those, I think, play off really well. I think this felt like a really confident film in the way, because The Endless, if I remember correctly, was about 2 hours, I want to say. And not that it was super overly long or anything, but this one's a bit tighter at 1 hour 40, and I kind of felt a more just confident hand in the script and in the direction, where it felt like it had this direction it wanted to go and it knew what beats it wanted to put down. Although that said, I actually do think there's a couple of, and maybe that's just because I went in as blind as I could, but there was a couple of things that I thought were almost like red herrings, but not in a plot way, just red herrings in I wonder, is this what this movie is going to be? There was a couple of times where I thought I knew what the movie was going to kind of be, and then it didn't. It went into what it actually was going to be. But I'll get into that in spoilers, what I thought. But there was a couple of moments where I thought, it's going to be like this. And then it wasn't like that. It went down its own path. And it's actually kind of funny looking back at the first 20, 30 minutes of the movie, once you do know where it's going, and going, it does kind of feel like we've transitioned into something that's a little bit different. And I almost wonder how those early scenes play off on a rewatch now. Now I know where it's going. I'm very curious, and I do think it's going to be worth a rewatch at some point to see how those scenes play, knowing what path it takes, and maybe looking at those early drug trips in the context of knowing
what's
going
actually
on.
happening to them. Yeah.
I think there's some interesting stuff there, but the concepts are fun. I kind of like the sort of sci-fi concepts that these guys do like to tackle. They kind of speak to me in a because especially this one, like there's literally at one point like a whiteboard with a list of rules. And you know me, I love rules when it comes to setting up some sort of sci-fi concept because it makes it feel like, okay, the characters are figuring things out. They're coming at it with a scientific method, and there's going to be some rules and context. And
well, Mackie refers to himself as an armchair scientist of some type, physicist.
I was physicist, yes. Yes, which is separate from
everything. Like the ideas, but not the math.
This is separate from everything else that's going on. Earlier in the movie, he just has this. He's talking to someone because he's a paramedic, and they've got like an injured man in the back of the ambulance, and he's just talking to him, and he talks about how he loved physics, but not equations or anything like that, not numbers, just the theories of physics.
Yeah.
And he starts talking about.
I do too.
Yeah, I do.
I guess if someone can break, I like a Brian Greene book where he just breaks it down for us dum dums, or a Stephen Hawking book.
I mean, it doesn't surprise me that there's a character who says something like that in here because I feel like if you are a fan of science fiction, to some extent, you do kind of agree with that sentiment, even if I wouldn't say that about myself. At my core, I guess I kind of do because my favorite type of science fiction tends to be when it is kind of based on a more grounded, like
something tangible.
Like it's not even, I don't even like the word grounded. I just kind of mean like they sort of present it as, okay, what if, and then we still try to follow the rules of physics around the one key thing we've changed to make the plot happen, and then use physics beyond that point to kind of make it work. Like I kind of like
I mean, you're just sort of describing Star Trek.
I mean, I was thinking more of a primer or stuff like that, but sure.
Yeah, well, Star Trek is based around like real things in physics, but then everything is solved by reversing polarity from the deflector dish and rerouting into the auxiliary system.
Which is why
it's like putting too much air into a balloon.
See, I think The Expanse, from everything I know from people who have like know anything about science and physics, who have watched that show, say it's the most accurate thing that anyone's ever done set in space. As far as like what space travel and space combat would be like. Star Trek, well, there may be some stuff based in, science.
Well, it still has to be entertaining.
Are you implying that The Expanse is not entertaining?
I don't know. I've not seen it.
Yeah, well, exactly. So, how dare you? but I think that's when I really like stuff. And while obviously I'm not saying this movie is exactly like that, because it's not. Like, this movie presents a really out there concept once it gets going, but it kind of does give itself some rules, and it says this is why this works with this character and why it does this and what's going on, and here's some simple rules, which there's a little bit of vagueness so that we can have a little bit of ambiguity at a certain point, which we'll get into, and I'm sure we'll debate a little bit about how we thought this ended. I mean, maybe we'll just have the exact same opinion. I mean, I have no idea, but
yeah, maybe.
But it is open for some debate. I think there is definitely a little bit of the spinning top.
Yeah,
as
there's
it were.
a little bit of a they didn't answer that.
Yes, and I think it says a lot about someone's philosophy, whether or not they choose to go with one answer or the other. I think. So,
yeah, I can see that. So I do like the idea of the leads being paramedics also. It's just not a thing that I've seen very much of, and it seems like the guys, the directors, like probably did lots of ride-alongs or something, because it seems very natural, like the way they talk and what their nights are like and their personalities, because they're constantly dealing with death all the time.
Maybe, yeah. I know, you're right, though. It's an interesting profession, because we're so used to cops and
even doctors or nurses.
Yeah, I mean, they're less.
Time.
Obviously, cops are the most common, but yeah, doctors, nurses, lawyers. Like, there's a lot of professions that are used a lot for protagonists. Paramedics. I feel like there's other random things that are more common than paramedics, even though paramedics would clearly be a very eventful, vocation to have. Like, I feel like I've seen more movies and TV shows about, like, garbage men that I have about paramedics. And that's not an exaggeration. Like, I think that's just true.
I agree.
Yeah. So, or delivery drivers. I feel like I've seen more shows about, you know, a FedEx driver or something equivalent. King of Queens, like the main character in that was, I think it was UPS, but, or maybe it was a made up one, I can't remember. But it doesn't matter. The point is that I've seen more delivery driver protagonists than I have paramedics.
Right. Yeah, it's just interesting that I don't think I've seen anything before. Like there'll be like a scene in an ambulance, but you don't follow the paramedic.
Yeah, the paramedic's usually there for the serial killer they've just picked up to like kill when he escapes the ambulance. That's usually what they're there for. I suppose
for the zombie to come back alive and
I suppose
murder everyone in the truck.
Paramedics in a way are more of a pickup driver when you think about it. They're picking up on location.
I got it.
Yeah. Sensitive packages, fragile. Do not handle with care.
Right.
So, characters are interesting. You know, Anthony Mackie's character Steve, he has kind of obviously the core character arc, and I mean, not to say that the Dennis Taylor character doesn't, because he does have an arc as well. He's very important to the themes of the film, and their friendship is very important to the themes of the film. But Steve, you know, gets some pretty big news early on in the film about his health, which I don't think is too spoiler to say that, because it's just kind of a setup for the character. But that sort of makes him sort of reconsider his life and all these things, and that kind of ties into choices he's going to make and other stuff like that. So I think where it goes with those characters and kind of the final points about life it wants to make, I think are actually, I mean, you can boil it down to, like, you know, cherish life, right? And sure, if you boil it down to that, it sounds a bit simplistic, but I do think the way it kind of explores these two specific characters, because Dennis is a family man, he's got a wife, he's got a teenage daughter who's like 18 and getting ready to move out, as well as a baby who's, you know, like 1 or something. And you know, it sounds like the first kid was maybe why they got married. Like that was the accident at the start of the relationship, and then it's like, okay, I guess we're kind of. And Anthony Mackie, on the other hand, has Steve character. He's the playboy who's just been sleeping around his whole life, and now that he's, you know, in his 40s, he's like, you know, a bit of a Job. Maybe I've made a huge mistake, not looking for something more meaningful, kind of thing.
Hooking up with, I mean, the girls are probably getting younger, you know, because he's getting older, and so now it's, things are probably just catching up to him. Like, he feels old because he's around younger people too. And I think I enjoy the two, you know, dynamics of the different characters when they interact. Like, they both sort of long for the other person's life, and I think it's a smart idea for Jamie Dornan's character to have like this thing he's going through where his accidental child, which we assume she is 18. So she's the age of where, you know, she's in college. She's basically an adult and doing her own thing now. But then he has a baby, a 1-year-old. So like, he's always longing to have this other life, and now it's just starting over again, where it's like, I'm gonna have to wait another 18 years because for my opportunity, and by then I'll be too old. And so like, he's really like just ruminating in his best friend's life. And it's particularly hard, I think, because he's, you know, everything's resetting again.
Yeah, they're both kind of coming to terms with being unhappy with who they are, and they both look at the other person's life as more desirable, and that's kind of a part of the themes of the film and what it's playing with. I think it does some interesting stuff with that. There is a couple of things that feel like there's a narrative device that's used a couple of times that I felt it was setting something up, which is why I thought the film was going to be something a little bit different at a certain point. Because when we talk about it switching into what it becomes and really sort of like, okay, that's what this movie is, right? And you know exactly what I'm talking about when I say that. That's like halfway through the movie, or maybe just before halfway. So it's something in that realm. There's a good period of time before that where you're kind of waiting for the, okay, what is, you know, where is this actually kicking into some sort. And it's not that it's bad, but I'm not saying I was waiting for it and that it's not doing something or it's not being interesting. It's actually a very entertaining, almost like mystery of like they keep finding
what's
like
happening to all these teenagers. And stuff,
they keep finding the wrappers of this drug, which you can just buy in a couple of stores at these different like victim scenes, and
they're all like gruesome deaths or like people just barely holding on to life.
Yeah. And they're all kind of mysterious. They can't really explain a lot of them. They'll just try to like do the best they can. But you've got kind of that mystery, almost like thriller element of it, where it's making Anthony Mackie a bit more curious and like, what's going on here? This isn't right. Like, what's happening? And you've got like kind of that mixed with his personal stuff. So it's actually a very interesting film. Like when I'm saying it doesn't really become what it's going to be until like halfway through, I'm not saying I was waiting for something interesting to happen, because that's not the case at all. It just becomes. What you're going to talk about when you talk about this movie and remember it for, it's what it becomes halfway through is what you're going to talk about.
Yeah.
So, which is why it makes it a little bit difficult to talk about and spoiler free, which is why we're probably ready about going to spoilers. But I think I want to make that clear is that it is actually a very engaging film because of the characters, because of the drama, because of the mysterious deaths and some of the visuals that's used. Because we do open with a couple of characters who are on the drug. To sort of give us a sort of a visual spectacle to kick off with, and then it settles us into introducing our main characters and all the rest of it. And it's got a tone, it's got a vibe, it's got kind of a gloomy, dark feel to the whole thing because they are, because the characters all are a little bit sad in a way, so the film feels a little bit sad, and like it's not a happy world that they're living in.
Yeah, so. I also want to say it's not too dissimilar from the two main characters of The Endless and their struggle for like wanting to have a purpose in life, and one being more jealous of the other one for the way they are, for the way they get to live. You
could probably argue that it's maybe just them refining an idea that they thought they did a good job on, but they thought they could have done even better, and this is them. Or it could just be a case of this is something they're going to keep coming back to, in the way that a lot of directors have a couple of themes they always like to return to, and maybe this idea of like two characters who are like kind of different, like clashing or having this friendship or brotherhood, because these characters obviously aren't brothers, but it feels like it feels like they've been together as best friends for decades. I think Anthony Mackie mentions at one point they introduced him to his wife, which was at least 18 years ago. So they've been together for a long ass time. So yeah, those ideas of brotherhood and all those things are there. I guess minor shout out. I mentioned this before we started actually, but Dennis's wife in the film is named Tara, but they pronounce it so goddamn weird that I didn't know her name was. I thought it was Tori until I saw the name on IMDb. So just.
It's exciting. I never see my name in the IMDb list or hear it on TV.
You should watch the hit television show Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Yeah, that is in there, huh?
There's some quality Tara time on that show.
Yeah, I suppose that's true.
Particularly seasons 4 through 6, you'll find a lot of Tara.
I only got through season 4, so I do remember her actually, and that is a popular show, but I didn't really watch.
Oh, you didn't even get to the part where Amy Adams shows up as her cousin. You didn't even get to the Tara's extended family.
Nope. There was a Tara on Sons of Anarchy. I watched the first season of that reluctantly, and I didn't like it, and I really didn't like the character of Tara in that show either.
Was that Peggy Bundy playing Tara?
No, it was the younger girl.
It's the only one I know.
But they had a lot of scenes together.
It's the only woman I know who's in that show. I was going to say it's the only actor, but that's not true because I know Ron Perlman's in it. It's hard not to know Ron Perlman. He's delightful man. All right, let's go to spoilers.
And my name does come from a movie, but Peter said I shouldn't say which one.
I'll just leave that sitting there, and then people can wonder. That's more mysterious that way. So let's go to spoilers. Full spoilers for Synchronic. From this point on, you have been warned. This is a time travel movie. Do you know what? It's like, so, and I like how this is set up because you have the idea that Anthony Mackie's character Steve, and a scene that made me smile with glee not because it's not uncomfortable or like disturbing to watch, but because I know that if I made Connor watch this movie, he'd have a heart attack because he hates needles, right? So there's a scene early on where they go to like their first like victim scene. I mean, that's not victims per se, but you know what I mean. The first ODs, right?
Their first kills.
And he's helping like a kid who's like struggling to breathe. And when I say kid, we're talking like late teens here, right? They're just because even
late teens, early 20s.
Yeah, because
experimental phase, college years.
Well, yeah, but the point I'm trying to make is that Brianna, we know she's 18, but clearly she's still young enough for this. Her gland is not calcified yet. More than that in a minute. But no. So Anthony Mackie is like helping this young person, and he goes ow, and he picks up his hand, and there's just a needle, like a syringe, just dangling from his hand, and I'm like, oh. That's nasty.
Yeah, it was a good bit of body horror. There's a lot of like gore in this too. People have some gruesome deaths in it.
And he goes to, obviously, when he's like, he finishes his job for the night, but he goes to obviously the doctor to get checked up, get some shots because he's been hit with a needle, and the nurse is like,
get some blood work done.
And the nurse is like, look, like I've never actually had a positive like test for HIV from a needle. I mean, it's possible, so but don't worry too much, right? I think you're going to be fine. He's like, yeah, I'm a bit hungover, whatever. But then he gets a call, clearly, and they're testing and they've found something. And he goes to the doctor, and the doctor makes him go for an MRI. And lo and behold, there is a tumor.
There's a tumor.
There's a tumor. And
it is a tumor.
So obviously this is very sad and depressing news. But he points out that it's in kind of a weird spot. It's actually usually when someone gets a tumor in that part of the brain, it's a little bit lower down or whatever. And he explains that gland that he's got is a bit weird because he's a man in his 40s, it should look different, but it looks like a teenager's. And obviously at this point in the movie, it's just kind of like, okay, this is an interesting thing to bring up, but at this point we don't know why that's important, right? For the relevance of the plot. We just, okay, interesting. And obviously he's dealing with this. He doesn't want to tell his friend. He's too scared to tell him. He keeps this to himself. He goes for chemo a couple of times. We see him throwing up. And this is actually the point. We'll go back and talk about the various ODs because I think they're all interesting on their own. But at this point in the film, when he's going for chemo and he's throwing up, it started to cut back to like previous conversations, but we were seeing parts of the conversation we hadn't seen yet. So it was doing this sort of jumping around the narrative. And I genuinely thought, especially when it brought up the synchronic drug, was like, oh, like you see time differently, right? And I thought, wait, is that what this movie's going to be? Is that we're going to start seeing this out of order, and we're going to realize that he is actually jumping through all these different parts of time, and experiencing them all out of order, and like we're seeing it this way, and it's going to get more complicated as it goes. And it's not that at all. Like it does it a few times, and then it kind of lets it go, and the movie just goes on. But there was enough of it.
It's more of just a narrative choice of like we want to hold this until the end.
But because it was playing with, like, it was starting to bring up the concept of seeing time differently when you're on Synchronic. Anthony Mackie, after he discovers this, he goes to like the store that he knows that that was selling the drug because there was like a bag at one of the scenes, and he buys up all the Synchronic they've got left. And you're thinking, wait, is he going to do something stupid because he's dying and he feels like he might as well? But he's not. He's actually like going to buy it all so no one else can buy it.
Because everyone has these gruesome deaths who take it.
He's seen all these horrible murders, so he's actually doing a really noble thing. And this guy tries to buy it off of him and then follows him to his house and explains to him that he's actually the guy who created it. He's trying to basically do what Anthony Mackie was doing. He was trying to track it down so he can get rid of it. Because it turns out that for adults it's fairly safe. And by adults, we don't necessarily mean just as soon as you turn 18, obviously. Because clearly people who are 18 to like 20 are still having the extreme effects. But for adults, it just lets you see time differently. Like you see time all at once, and he compares it to like a vinyl record, and like how all the tracks are there, but when you're on the drug, you're seeing all the tracks at the same time. So it's kind of this weird thing.
It's the Dr. Manhattan effect.
And we never see what this is like for someone who's of age. We never actually get an example of this. We just hear him describe it. But he says that and he mentions the same gland, right? Because they're not calcified yet. He's like, young people have a different experience where they just go somewhere, right? Because their brain's not developed enough. And of course, this is the moment we go, wait a minute, Anthony Mackie's brain is just like the young people's.
Like
this
a
is
teenager's brain.
This is going
Which
to
is
be
why he's a man-child also, maybe. Okay, so, well, maybe, because like I just watched, well, not just, a few weeks ago, I watched the movie From Beyond, which is also like very much focused on the pineal gland in the brain, because that is like the source of, I don't know, I don't want to say like pleasure receptors, but that might be it because, it's a Stuart Gordon movie. So, and given the themes of that film. And so now whenever people mention pineal gland, I just think of the thing coming out of Jeffrey Combs' forehead, because he's so stimulated. His pineal gland is so stimulated that it becomes like an antenna, grows out of his head.
That was a wonderful tangent.
You're welcome. So maybe it is connected.
But this guy explains this. And it's a sort of entertaining scene because Anthony Mackie's like threatening him with a baseball bat because this guy has broken into his house. Which, by the way, I didn't realize. So we actually see this place earlier on in the film, but I assumed it was the random woman that he'd slept with's house because he leaves her there. And then I remembered that when he was leaving, he said, "Oh, make sure you lock the door when you leave." And I was like, "Oh wait, he was just leaving this random woman, like in his house, like what?"
Who gave him a handshake?
Yes, because he goes to
That's such a cold move.
He goes to kiss her on the cheek after they've clearly slept together, right? And he's woken up early because he's got work, and he goes for just to peck her on the cheek, which is even if you're not feeling there's potential for more of this, it's a peck in the cheek. Like you've just had sex. Is it really that much of a big deal?
Sticking your hand out for a handshake is definitely an ender. Like that's it.
Yes,
that's gonna happen after a handshake.
Yeah, but I mean, she doesn't know this, I suppose. But I mean, we know she needn't worry given his track record at this point. Like we've heard at multiple points in this film that he's a once and gone type of guy.
Yeah, but still, it probably hurt a little bit. Like, damn, cold.
She says, "It was nice to meet you." And he's like, "It was nice to meet you too."
Yeah. Gives him a handshake in his own bed.
I feel like this is that episode of Black Mirror where they rate each other after every interaction. I feel like this is like the phone should have came out and should have given her like, yeah, solid 3 stars. Bye. Not standout amazing. 3.6, not great, not terrible.
Maybe at a bar at the end of the night and she's the only one left. I wouldn't say no.
Oh dear. So this doctor explains this stuff, and Anthony Mackie says he's flushed it all away, but then we see that he's not. He's still he did throw it away, but he just threw it in the trash, right? So it's down there, and he makes this choice to take the drug. And I'm going to pause this here, and we'll come back to this and continue from here. I want to talk about the other all the crime scene style things from earlier on because they're all quite interesting. So we get the glimpse of 2 people who are together in a hotel room taking the drug, and like the woman who's left on the bed, she sees like a guy with a mask, and it's like tribal times, and then she's bit by a snake, whereas the guy like goes into an elevator, and then it's like he's falling through like the sky in a desert, and it's really pretty stuff. And then we cut to our main characters, and they show up to another scene, and the only thing I'll say about this that I will critique is that the guy that was stabbed at this crime scene had a very similar beard, I thought, to the guy that was in the opening scene. So I actually thought it was the same guy until they went to the other crime scene. Yeah, because we
didn't really know what was happening yet.
Yeah, because the second crime scene they go to, I'm calling them crime scene for lack of a better term. The second crime scene,
probably works.
Is the people we saw in the opening. I was like, oh, okay. Which, by the way, the visual of the guy who went down the elevator shaft, where he's like, his legs like sitting on top of his chest, but he's got this big
behind his head,
and he's got a big smile in his face though as he's lying there in pieces, just like completely dead. It was wonderful stuff. And the women get bit by a snake, but they can't find a snake. I thought it was a little convenient that the other guy that was there knew exactly what kind of snake probably did it, even though it hasn't been in that area for decades, he said. But I mean, he was animal control, so maybe he would know. You know, do you know what's funny about that is that at the time it didn't bother me. I just thought it was a quirky gimmick that this guy was such an expert on snakes. But in hindsight, because he had that specific line of, oh, they've not been here in so long, I'm like, okay, that was maybe a little bit too set uppy.
Yeah. There are a couple lines that made me giggle in this. And I know they're not intended to, but another one was he brings up the paleo diet, and that made me laugh. And then there's like a super serious scene with Jamie Dornan. He's telling his wife Tara about like a story about Steve's character, and he ends it in like, and that was his 30th birthday, and that made me laugh so much. I don't know. It was just the extra cherry on top of like this painful story.
A little over the top at times. Yeah. No, I get it. I'll get back to that later though, because I don't want to talk about that story. But so you have the first guy they go to has been like stabbed by like what seems to be like a really big blade, but there's like no sword, it's like hanging around. And then the next victim they get to, like the third one they go to, is like which actually I got a really good laugh out of this actually. Which is they show up to this third scene and there's like a charred body. So it's like a skeleton that's just like charred, and they say, "Why did you call us?" And the cops, because it's like they said there's a burn victim, and the cop goes, "This is him." Here's like, "This isn't a burn victim. This is a body. we come for the living people."
The cop's like, "Well, the new guy did it. He's not too bright." The cops in this movie are depicted as like really dumb.
Yeah. In the opening like sequences with them going to the first crime scene, Anthony Mackie's wearing like a random top because he grabbed the wrong clothes on his way out of his apartment. Because again, he's had a one night stand, as we've heard that he has a lot of. And a cop sneaks up behind him and tells him to freeze, and like it takes him a minute to realize, oh wait, it's the paramedic dude that I've clearly seen before. So I don't know. What was it he says? Is what do you expect when you come in dressed like Tupac? I think was the line of dialogue he said.
Yeah. I mean, he's wearing a football jersey, but whatever.
Obviously it comes off a little racist, and which I actually do think smart foreshadowing, given some of the things we go to in the back half of the movie. Although, what actually reminds me of my favorite, because as funny as the burn victim moment is, my funniest moment of this whole movie, which is not like super funny, but there's a couple of good like intentional jokes, is actually when they're at the baby's birthday, and he says, "Oh, let me hold the baby," and they give him their baby, and the baby like immediately starts crying, and like, so I'll just give him back or give her back. I can't remember what the baby was, and he hands the baby back, and he just turns to Dennis, Jamie Dornan's character, and goes, "Racist baby," and it just really made me laugh.
Yeah, I always make babies cry just so the mother has to take them back. I don't want to hold your baby. I know you need a break, but I'm just so bad at babies.
How do you achieve making the baby cry consistently?
It doesn't take much. It's just you hold them awkwardly, and they realize that you're not their mother, and then they start crying. You just offer them no comfort.
You just stare into their eyes like you have no soul.
Yeah, it's just like, "Oh, thanks for giving me your baby. I guess I'll." "Oh no, it knows that I'm not you. Sorry, you'll have to take the baby back." It's beautiful,
So, yeah, all these scenes are all very interesting. Obviously, this is all sort of starting to interlink with him finding out about his illness. There is a couple of like weird coincidence things. The story, because we get a couple of quick flashes at various points in the film of like these like coffins washing up on shore, and I thought it was like a dream sequence that maybe it was cutting back to or something. It wasn't until Jamie Dornan's character tells this story to his wife that this is something that actually happened after Katrina, where some cemeteries, like the water actually like lifted the graves, the caskets basically. And it's like, okay, that's pretty dark. And I thought it was going to tell a dark story where one of the coffin lids was open, and Anthony Mackie saw, a dead child skeleton, and it was this like big moment for him. But they go one step further, and it's a giant step further, where this is actually
they take like 4 steps further.
this is actually Anthony Mackie's family. This is like his dead parents and sister who all died in an accident at some point in his life.
They all floated together.
And I was like, okay, this was a bit hard to swallow. This was all a bit much.
Yeah. On his 30th birthday.
Yeah, which is about 10 or so years ago. Because I know Anthony Mackie at least turned 40 like, I don't know, a year or two ago. So I'm just assuming he's about that age in the movie as well.
Yeah.
Stands to reason. So yeah, I'll be honest, I kind of forgot about that scene until you brought it up, because it actually is kind of like, you can just forget about it, honestly. I'm sure like someone's going to thematically think of a good reason why it exists in the movie, but it's so overly dramatic, or honestly overly melodramatic, that I think the movie would be better if you just cut it.
Yeah, I guess it's trying to justify like why he's such a player, or like why he's trying to search for like a quick thrill.
He's scared of loss. He lost his whole family, so he doesn't like the idea of starting his own. Because
not just that, but like the graves were looted like before that they were able to get to them.
Sure, yeah.
So like it wasn't just that he saw his like baby sister's corpse, but that like they were also robbed, like grave robbed, and all three of them were together. And then his friend, Dornan, is the one who passed out because he was thinking of his daughter the whole time, who was like around that age.
Yeah, she would have been like 8 or something at the time, yeah. So, yeah, it's just an overly it's funny because I actually really like the movie, but I think that scene is pretty bad.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the things where I mentioned like some of the longer dialogue scenes and storytelling scenes are a bit awkward. It's just, just a little bit of refining.
But of course, the fourth crime scene they go to turns out to have a bit of a big coincidence, but this one's important for the plot, so this is the one that you give it leeway on, right? Is that they go to another scene where some people have taken this drug, someone's like out of it. There's another girl who's just who doesn't seem to have taken that drug, she's just like, off her face on something else. And they mention there was another girl there, and then they say Brianna, and that's the name of what's his face, Dennis's daughter. So he calls his wife, says, is she there? Like, because obviously he doesn't know for sure it's his daughter, his Brianna at first, but then when she's not at home, it's like, oh shit, like,
she's not there, her phone's disconnected. Yeah.
And they do seem like pretty easygoing parents in the sense that there's a scene with him where he's playing basketball with her and he's just trying to talk to her about her grades and why she's kind of in a slump and so on. And there's also a couple of scenes where it shows that they are quite easygoing parents, and that, okay, you're 18, we accept that you are free to go and like go out all night if you want, but just do us a favor and like text us and let us know so we're not worried. Like, pretty reasonable, modern parenting requests, I think.
Yeah.
So like it gives us this thing where she comes across as maybe a bit more of a real character because she isn't just the perfect daughter, and she's a bit of a like dropout, but not like a total dropout either. Like she's doesn't seem like a complete idiot or anything like that. She's just is having a bit of a existential crisis of like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. Like I'm in college because I'm supposed to, but I don't know what I'm. No, she's not in college
doing
yet.
Here.
She's not in college yet. She's still in high school.
I thought that's where her grades are going down.
No, it was high school because she's talking about where she's going to move to. Yeah. So.
Okay. Well, I was thinking maybe like a community college or like in college freshman year, just doing whatever. But okay. I mean, she could be in high school too.
It's not a debate. She's in high school. Look, I don't know why you're trying to convince me. She's in high school. She's turned 18 before she's finished high school. That's pretty normal. I mean, especially since she's talking about leaving and going off to wherever for possibly college or whatever. Because that's their conversation. They even talk about like, does she even want to do that? She doesn't know what she wants to do.
Yeah.
But regardless, so this is obviously is like, okay, she's missing. Anthony Mackie's like throwing the rest of these drugs away. He yells at the guy for and even the woman who's selling them in the stores. He's like, this is like getting a bunch of kids killed. What the hell are you doing? Should be ashamed of yourself. But once he hears all this stuff about what the pill does and how it sends younger people away somewhere because of their different brain, and he's like, oh, my brain's like theirs.
Pineal gland.
Penny will go, yeah, what?
I was just repeating it.
Look, I'm not going to remember. I'm never going to say it consistently, okay?
They say it a lot in the movie, that's all.
Yeah, sure. Why does it matter? Now it's a thing. It wasn't a thing. And now it's a thing. Because you're trying to make a point of like making me look dumb.
No, never. That's not my intention.
Okay. So he's like, F it. I'm going to take one and see if I go somewhere. I'm going to see if I can find her, right? That's the idea. If she has went somewhere, if she's physically disappeared somewhere, then I'm going to take one and find it. And the movie like could turn people off at this point. I think when you see him like sort of disintegrate and go to a different time, I think that's a jump the shark moment for people who were liking that it wasn't being like overtly sci-fi up to that point. So depending on your taste, this might be where you're not thrilled about the direction it's taking. But if you're on board, this is where it kind of really gets interesting and starts really doing some stuff where once he does, like, he goes back to like when it's a swamp, there's a gator, there's a guy trying to kill him with a spear, and
yeah, a conquistador.
We establish some rules here because he travels back to where he was on the couch, and it was 7 minutes. That's how long he spends in the past, and then he concludes that if he's in a different spot, he travels back to a different point in time. So and we're not talking about a vastly different space. We're talking about like 3 foot over in the same room. Like he's on the couch the first time, then the second time he's just on the floor next to the TV, and that takes him to the Ice Age.
Yeah, I guess this is sort of like the comparison to the dropping the needle on a record. Like the time is always there, but like depending on where you drop the needle is what you're going to listen to or where you're going to go. So in this case, it's like actually like just your physical, like where you're standing is where it depends on which time you're going to go to.
And this time what I like about it is that he does actually immediately start to freeze. And I'm like, well, it's only 7 minutes, so you'll probably survive. But when he does come back, like he is like, he goes
to the Ice Age in the second one. So.
Yeah. So he goes to like a warm bath and he's like shivering. He's got like his beard's all frozen and like, So he tests a theory. He's like, okay, if I do it in the same spot, will I go back to the Ice Age? So this time, he takes a jacket and a hat, and he's got some wood with him. He's holding some wood so he can start a fire. And there's a dude here this time who comes up. He's very cautious with his spear at first, but then he's like, no, fire. He's like, enjoy the heat.
Yeah, I saw him like going, like he wanted to touch Mackie before like he would do anything. So I wonder if he thought that maybe he was some sort of ghost, like because the guy was definitely there the first time he went to the
that's exactly it.
Also, but he was in the distance.
He saw him disappear. Yeah, he saw him the first time and he saw him disappear.
So it was more like a cautious thing, like, are you actually real? Is this fire real? Or is this some sort of shaman trick? And I like that we get to see a mammoth. I mean, it's cliche, but I like seeing the woolly mammoth in the background too.
Yeah, that was nice. It's not. For a movie about paramedics going around finding like OD victims, there's a lot of pretty visual points with very different locations. So he's like, oh shit, okay. And he's like, keep in mind he's got a limited number of these pills. He got like maybe 8 or 9 or something, like when he grabbed them. And
yeah, the lady said it was discontinued.
Yeah.
And of course, when he meets the chemist, he's like, well, there's only one left that I know of, and I'll take care of it, basically. And then we hear, I don't know when exactly, but on the news, we hear that that chemist died.
Yes.
Presumably on a bad trip.
So he tries it again, and he's still testing things, right? He's like, because the next thing he wants to test, and this is what I like, because he's recording like a video diary of this happening, and like discussing his like discoveries after each one. And this is I love this. I love this problem solving. It's like, okay, number 1, it lasts 7 minutes and you come back. Number 2, your physical place dictates what time period you go to. But it is worth mentioning, you always go to where you're standing in that past, right? Where you're standing changes what time you go to, but it's Back to the Future rules. You always go back to that spot in history. Forget the fact that the Earth's revolving around the sun and stuff. Just go with it. Right? So just go with it. It's like tied to the core of the Earth, and you're always the same distance from the core or something. I don't know. Whatever. Anyway, so he wants to test. Oh, what can I take back with me? Can I take back another living thing? Which is why he takes back his dog.
Obviously his clothes are all coming back with him, because that would be awkward if he always showed up naked.
Of course, he probably would have frozen to death in 7 minutes if he'd went back to the Ice Age naked.
Totally.
So he's got a dog, and he's like, I'm going to take my dog back with me. And
yeah, I shouted at my TV like, you better not let anything happen to that dog.
And of course, this is the time where he ends up in a house. Like, there's a house here, but it's in not a good time to be a black person, let's just say. And this old white guy starts yelling for the police like immediately as soon as he sees him. And he goes out on the run, and when he runs into town with the dog, he sees like all these like white people with beards all just starting to look at him like they're about to like saddle up. And he's like, he looks at his timer and he's like, okay, I'm almost going to go. And it was almost that thing where you knew for the irony, this isn't going to happen. Like, he's going to discover that he's not going to travel back unless he's maybe in the same spot, which turns out to be the case. He has to actually be in the original starting spot to travel back. Yeah,
because he's got the pineal gland, non-calcified pineal gland. He can get stuck just like the girl we think is.
Yeah, because that's the idea, is that she ended up stuck somehow. So he runs away, hides in the woods, watching the house until it comes time. The only leap here that struck me as a little bit odd is that he just assumes that he has to take another pill to travel back to present day, which made me question, is like, well, if you stay in the same spot in present day, will you actually snap back to the past because that's where you started this time? They never go into that.
Yeah, there's a little bit of an Inception thing going on. Like, can you take a pill within a time period where you're on a pill? I don't know. Will it be longer than 7 minutes then?
Well, I never thought about the time thing, but I guess the question is that if he takes the pill in the past and doesn't go to the same spot, because presumably the same spot in the floor will link him back to the same time period. It's like a two-way bridge, right? But if he was standing in a different spot in the past, he wouldn't travel to his time. He would travel to some other random time. But that begs the question, if he can stand in the same spot and go back to present day, technically that's going to the future at that point. So it's kind of interesting that the movie never posed the question, is there spots in the locations where you will travel to the future instead of the past?
Yeah, it's only a one-way direction in this case.
Yeah. Well, two-way in the sense that you can come back, but yeah, one way in the sense that it's never the future. It's always like the present is the present and there's nothing beyond that, seemingly.
Yeah.
But it
does.
But
the way that time is described is like, oh, you can see all time, like it's all happening at once.
Yeah, and like I said, if you can take the pill in the past, stand in the right spot, and come back to the present, that would imply that you could, if you're in the right spot, and we don't know where those right spots are, but if you could figure out the right spot, you could go into the future. It seems just as likely as anything else.
Yeah, unless the present is as future as you can go, because I mean, maybe every spot is linked to. That wouldn't make sense. But like, seemingly, you can stand on any spot in the present and go back to a random time. Like, it's all tethered to the present, no matter where you are on Earth.
How do you know it's tethered to the present? What makes you say that?
Because every spot that you stand on Earth, you are tethered to. Like, if you take the pill and you stand somewhere, then it'll go to the past, and you are still tethered to the present, not necessarily to the future.
You're not tethered to the present. You're tethered to the time you came from. I think that's an important distinction here, because that doesn't mean that there is no future. And like you said, if you go by we can see all time simultaneously, then the future exists too.
Well, I mean, maybe this is a thing where the future is like, we're as future as it's going to get, and there is nothing beyond that. I don't know. In this case, like we're writing it as it's happening, and therefore you can't go further than the present.
Yeah, but I don't think the movie suggests that though. If anything, the movie suggests the opposite. So, I know, I get why it's not in the movie. I get why it opens too many doors, and it's not what the movie wants to explore. It's got like a story it needs to stick to. But keep it. I mean, we only see him try it in like half a dozen spots. Like,
yeah, but we see other victims, and none of them seem to have any like laser beam blast to the chest, or unless that desert one in the beginning is actually the result of global warming.
That would have been an interesting tease, actually, if one of the ODs that we don't see how it happened, but we just see like an injury that is like, how did that happen? That's like this like a predator gun went through his chest or something. But there really is nothing to suggest in the film that they can't go into the future. Just if you were standing on the right spot. The fact that he can take the pill in the past and come back to the present day means that you can, because technically he's tethered to that time period now. He's not tethered to present day when he does that. He makes the opposite trip because he just knows what spot to stand on, but he's not tethered to the present day when he makes that jump again. But he's right anyway. He takes the pill again. He runs in the house. But there's a bit of drama here, of course, where, you know, the goddamn KKK run in the door because they're expecting him to show up now because they know he's running around. And it's like, yeah, they come in with their hoods and everything. The dog runs. Ready. Yeah, the dog runs for them. And when he travels back to the present, even though he was able to grab the leash, the dog was too far away from him. So it sounds like, you know, he sort of comes to the conclusion, and obviously it's a very sad scene, but it comes to the conclusion that you have to, like, if you're going to travel with another living person, it has to be like proper, like, hugging style, because that's the first time he travels with a dog. He's hugging the dog, like it's completely sort of with him.
Yeah, it's in contact, like he's touching the dog. I wonder if he was like hugging like a person, would he just take back their jacket, or does it have to be like, does he have to touch skin?
Well, I mean, I don't know. I don't know.
It's transporter rules. You just gotta hold on.
Yeah, I think it's just a case of holding on.
Yeah.
But, you know, the leash is just sort of frayed at the end. You know, it was... I presume it's like, it might even just be a simple case of like, you have to be touching, but they also have to be in the same like spot. Like, we don't know how big these spots are, but presumably they're only a few feet because of where he does it in his living room. So
why doesn't the couch stay then? Or like the floorboards he's standing on?
Because he's not holding those.
He's just sitting and standing on them.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because if he's holding a leash, he's holding it in his hand, so he's actually pulling it with him. He's not actually like holding the couch. He's like, I mean, if he held on tight, like gripped the arms of the couch, maybe he would bring the couch with him. I don't know. So it's really sad. The dog is left behind. Although notably, there is like a moment here where he looks out the window and he sees the dog for a little bit, like he's like the dog's bleeding through time because there was a connection, and he sort of gets to say goodbye, and it's really sad because now the dog's stuck in like, you know, the deep south and like a horrible time period.
They might eat him.
They might, yeah.
Maybe they'll love him. Yeah, he seemed like a good boy.
But regardless, obviously, we all think the same thing at this point in the movie. You're thinking he has to go to the spot where she disappeared, and that's where he has to try this. And he goes to that spot, which is just on a roof where she was hanging out with friends, or so he believes. Obviously, we find out in a minute that this was not where she was when she transported. But he ends up in like proper like tribal times where this tribe tries to like, we don't really know what they're going to do, but they talk about like maybe sacrificing him or honoring him, but they all sort of grab at him and stuff. And what makes this one really awkward is that his landing spot when he traveled here was like halfway up a tree, because he like falls out a tree when he arrives, so he has to like, you know, run away from them and climb the tree and get back up to the top part, so he can get out, which is a little bit in the, you know, the difficult side.
Yeah, so we make the connection here that if he touches something physical from the present, then he's able to to make it back. He doesn't have to take another pill, or like that's all it takes, right? Is that there's a physical connection?
Well, no, it's not that he doesn't have to take another. If it's not within the 7 minutes, he still has to take another pill. It's more just that he wasn't necessarily right in the exact space yet, but the chair he was sitting on appeared in the tree, and because he grabbed onto it and he sort of tethered himself to the present, he was able to sort of pull himself into the present kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not.
I was worried he was going to like apparate in like halfway through the roof.
Oh sure, yeah. No, he pulls himself into the present. He comes, and it's like an extra little rule, which is important for the ending. There is one thing about the ending that it doesn't quite make sense to me, which I'll get to. But so obviously he gets annoyed. The other friend who has survived is there, and she's like, no, she wandered off. Like before, I was like, oh great, thanks for that. So he's only got a few pills left. I think he's got like 2 left at this point, and he finally meets up with Dennis again, who's depressed. His wife won't talk to him. She's like just locked in a room because her daughter's missing, and he's been like really like shady and dark because he's just like, oh, we're going to have to search the river, and she's like, why are you assuming she's dead? can we assume that she's alive, please, and find her? So they're a really strained relationship, and him and Anthony Mackie have this big, heart to heart where he reveals he's got his tumor. He kind of cracks this joke about, I was going to make a joke about your haircut being bad earlier, implying that he's glad that he didn't, now that he knows like why his hair's probably starting to change. Like, and they have this moment where he's like, I need to show you something, and he shows him the video diaries, and he's like in shock about this, and like, what do we do? Like, I should be the one to go back, it's my daughter, and he's like, no, it can't be you, like it has to be me. Like, there's like fate dealt us this hand where like I'm the only one who can try and save her if this is where she is, if this is what's happened. And they come to the conclusion that she might have left a message that would have been permanent. And you kind of know where they're going with this, because there's a scene like back at the baby's birthday party, which was at this like, sort of like by the river. There's like a rock that she liked to sit on that has like someone carved the word always into it, but it was like misspelled. It had 2 L's, which if you read it and assume there's a space, it would read as always, which I thought was an interesting thing to think about, just in terms of what that might mean. But they go to this rock, and okay, this has to be the spot, right? She likes to come here and look out into the water. This is our best bet. So
also that was the last thing that Dornan said to her, was the word always.
Yeah, and I really like how it cuts into him disappearing here, because Dornan's talking to Anthony Mackie the whole time, and Anthony Mackie's sitting in the rock, he's waiting for the pill to kick in, and he's like basically pouring out his heart, and he says a lot of nice things, and then he's about to go into another part, and then he turns and looks, and he's just gone. And the way the camera cuts to it is very nicely done, because we don't realize
you hear the drop of like the bottle or glass that he's drinking out of.
Yeah, but I think that happens on the cut though, so it's not like you sort of like know before it cuts. It sort of happens on the cut, where it kind of just like, it's like a sort of shock moment for him, where he's like, shit, like he saw the footage, but obviously in the back of his head he's probably still not convinced. Like, okay, we're doing this thing, but does he really believe that he's going to time travel? And then he looks over and like he's not there, he's disappeared. It's like, oh, I guess this was true. So he ends up in the Civil War. And it's like a battlefield. It's like, there's like
fire
bombs are going off. There's a trench. There's like dead bodies everywhere, and he's running around.
Dead bodies full of millennials.
Wait, what?
They all have that millennial look, the beard and the nothing. I was making a stupid joke.
I don't get it.
You don't think like the millennial guy looks like someone from the Civil War?
The millennial guy? Who's the millennial guy?
Millennial. Our age group.
No, I know what millennial means, but who's millennial? Who are you talking about?
All the dead people. Never mind.
Wait, are you arguing they don't look time appropriate? Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying they all look like people that I see at a brewery in present day. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know why you hate this so much.
I don't know. He said it in a really confusing. Like, I'm tired. Okay, he said it in a really confusing way, and I'm like, what are you
I
talking
probably
about?
did. I'm tired also.
What about millennial? What are you talking about? I guess does Anthony Mackie? No, I think Anthony Mackie's slightly too old. I think he's technically Gen X, but regardless, he finds her. He finds her in a trench. Tara's annoyed at me now because I completely no-sold her millennial joke.
What happens next?
So yes, he finds her. She's got like one of the red coats on. She's honestly, they don't really give us much of an indication of how long she's experienced being here. Like, has it been like real time where because she's been missing for like X number of days, she's been here for X number of days, or is he like because he's jumped back in time? Is it not moving at the same rate, or is it literally just minutes after she's gotten here? I mean, the fact that she's wearing the coat and looks all dirty would imply that she's maybe been here for at least a while, like hours at least, but.
Yeah.
It doesn't specify, which is fine. It's not a big deal, but it's just one of those things that you think about a little bit. But he's like, look, here's a pill. Take this. Which I thought was weird because he's only got the one pill left to give to her, and all I thought was, but you established that if you just hug her, if you go back with her and hug her, you've got a second chance because you've got another pill.
Mm-hmm.
Why give her a pill too? And I guess you're giving her a separate chance on her own, but you could have two chances of getting both of you back rather than one of each, which I thought was weird. I also thought it was kind of weird that she transferred. I guess that works. She went to the future, sitting on the rock, before Anthony Mackie's 7 minutes ran up. When she took the pill after he was already there and had been looking for her for a couple of minutes, that was a bit strange. I thought. Did that make sense to you?
No. No, it doesn't.
That's a fair answer.
Unless they were there longer than 7 minutes anyway, and he was just like, well, I can't make it back there unless you take the pill and then hug me, and I'm going to have you take it just for safety reasons because it's more important that you get back.
I mean, his watch goes off unless he just sets his watch for her, and because maybe if I go back and look at it again, maybe it goes off just as she's transporting, but I thought it went off after. And I thought that was weird. Like, why is his timer for his 7 minutes going after she's already transported when she's...
Yeah, I guess it's a bit unclear. I'm not sure.
Yeah. So that aside, though, because that's the one murky part I didn't really understand. But the big thing here is that when they're running back to the rock, trying to avoid any possible explosions, a Confederate soldier comes out and, points his gun at Anthony Mackie. And Anthony Mackie just tries to buy her time. Like he's basically, he's kind of in this position where he's like, I'm dying. I'm going to try and save her and make my life mean something. Mm-hmm. I'm going to do this for my friend and get his daughter back.
He's admitted that he's been ignoring his treatments because he's been taking care of this instead.
Yeah. And he just tries to talk this guy down and sort of like, basically concede. He gets on his knees. He says he'll be his slave. Like just, really. And he obviously notices that there's the unexploded, like a mine or whatever it is, and he's like, yeah, come here and get me, like kind of thing. And the guy does eventually step on it, but there's a bit of like, he kind of walks past it at first, then he steps back, and then he finally goes boom.
I didn't know they had landmines then.
Well, I don't think it was a landmine because it shot into the fight. Like someone fired it, it just didn't go off.
Okay. It's like a mortar or something.
I'm not an expert in munitions, especially not of the Civil War era, so you're going to have to cut me some slack here.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what it is either.
On explaining this, but I'm willing to go with it and just accept that there's an explosive that might not go off until, someone gives it a bit of a jolt.
Maybe there were landmines then. I don't know.
It doesn't seem that unbelievable, I guess. An explosive that triggers with a sensor. I mean, maybe the sensor's the part that feels a bit too far-fetched. I don't know. Anyway.
Well, I mean, you have to. It's just pressure, right?
Yeah, but I took it maybe less like a landmine and more like a grenade that's not went off, but if you have to like be gentle with it or it will go off, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Okay. So, yes. So he tries to get back to the rock, but it's kind of too late. So we get the end of the movie is that obviously Dennis is really happy to have his daughter back. But then Anthony Mackie, when he sort of comes through, he's kind of like the dog from the previous scene. He's kind of like, not, I would say a ghost, but he's kind of there, only kind of, right? Where he's kind of shimmering, he's kind of see-through. And it's like he's just getting to say goodbye before he's trapped in like an awful, awful time period. I mean, in fact, as he points out earlier in the film, they're pretty much all awful. Like the past kind of sucks by and large, for very different reasons depending on which time period, but they all kind of suck. He's got a little F Back to the Future speech that he makes at one point, which I thought was amusing. But he reaches out his hand, as does Dennis, and they shake hands. But when he shakes hands, it is a solid handshake. Like his hand forms enough for it to be a proper handshake. And then it ends there. And it's very ambiguous because given what he said about like tethering yourself to the present with the chair from that previous time that he jumped, you could read this ending as the connection with his best friend is going to pull him back into the present and save him. But it doesn't let you see it. It cuts away before you actually get a definitive that's going to happen or not.
I want it to be true. But there is the thing where, I mean, they liked The Rock because, or she liked The Rock because it said always in it. So they thought that that was a signal from her in the past that she wrote that. And then she says, I didn't write that. So your immediate thought is, okay, Mackie writes that then. Steve writes that into The Rock so that he knows in the future that that's where they need to come back to. But like, who writes it then if he goes forward or back to the present?
I mean, the beauty of it is that it could just be a random thing from some random person that has nothing to do with them, and they've given it meaning because they've assumed it was something written by one of them or by her. And then we obviously are meant to think that he just writes it himself afterwards, so they'll have that idea in the future. But even if it is just a random thing that someone wrote, it already has the meaning, because the daughter just discovered it, right? Like she just discovered that this rock had this word on it that was misspelled. It's entirely possible it is just random from some time in history. There's a lot of time between the Civil War and 2020 or whenever this is set. So. I think there's enough set up in the film to read the ending as his friendship with him, which is kind of the central heart of the film, is going to save him. Especially since so many things thematically in the film are about how he doesn't have connections, he doesn't let himself have connections other than his one friend. And even the, maybe the one dramatic reason for that story that we thought was over the top about the caskets, like maybe the reason why that's relevant is because in that situation, even though it was Anthony Mackie's trauma, it was actually Dennis who freaked out and passed out. But here in this situation, when it's Dennis's kid that's at danger, it's still Steve who's able to keep cool and go and like take care of business and sort of do his job, as it were. And the idea that that Dennis can be this tether for him is kind of like that's what he is for him, or what he was supposed to be for him but couldn't be. So his arc in a way is complete if he can be his tether at the end here, because when they found those caskets on not on the beach necessarily, but wherever the water washed them up, he's supposed to be the strong friend for him. He's supposed to be the one there who can be leaned on and be like, no, buddy, I'll get this. This is your family. You're too close to this. I'll be strong for you and take care of this. But he didn't, right? So him being there at the end.
On his 30th birthday, too.
On his 30th birthday. But him being there at the end to be this tether and sort of like pull him back in. Especially since Anthony Mackie's given him like several pep talks at this point about how he should like love his wife and how he should like be thankful for what he's got and how it is important to him. And he does kind of realize this because he calls his wife at one point and leaves her a message saying, I don't want to lose you. You're so important to me. I need you in this.
Yeah, and also Mackie has that speech with his friend that the only real difference between us is like random chances and luck, basically. Which,
Mhm.
and then, when he talks about the story about introducing Dennis to Tara, it's very much, well, Tara was interested in me first. But I wasn't, I was too tired or something. So I thought I'd set up my friend. So like he could have had that life. Like he could have, have an accidental pregnancy that night and had their lives could have been reversed, or, they both sort of long for each other's lives.
There's a lot of, meaning of life stuff in this. There's a lot of appreciating what you have and what time you have, and like realizing that your life had value in whatever life you did have. So Anthony Mackie feels like his life, it might have been wasted because he didn't build that family life and he wants that. But he also doesn't, realize that how important he's been to his friend and how much he's been there for him and how much he helped him set up that life that he has and how much he was, a strong rock for him. And no pun intended, because like a literal rock actually is obviously very symbolic at the end of the film. But you've got all those things at play with the two characters, which is good. It gives the film a lot more weight than it otherwise would have, and the actual core science fiction elements are fun to explore, and there's just enough sense in them that it all kind of works. There is that one weird thing about the time discrepancy between the two pill taking, in the final scenes that don't quite add up for me, but otherwise it mostly makes some sense and works in the context of the movie. And then it's fun to think back to, and we get glimpses of like how all the previous people died, where it's just like, oh, these are just like, the reason why it was so mysterious is because they were dying in situations in the past, but presumably because they were still in the same spot, they were transferring back to the present. So the burn victim was in a house that was burning down and then transferred back to the present, but was now a charred corpse. And that was all that was left. And so on and so on. The guy was stabbed with a big fancy conquistador sword or whatever. Like, all these different things.
Yeah. I do like that it's not like romanticizing the past also. Like we see so many films about time travel and going back in time, or like people longing for a simpler time in life, and like,
they're mostly shit.
The past wasn't great, especially if you were a black man in America. There are definitely a lot of decades, centuries that you would like to skip.
I mean, I think you could expand it to if you were not a white man. If you're not a straight white man, most periods in history suck.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with Louis C.K.'s stand-up where he talks about that, like, when we still liked him.
Yeah, I was like, this is the guy you want to bring up to make a
but it
point?
Was very, well, yeah, I mean, his stand-up, was funny. Now it has that, like, pervy thing, that lens that you watch it through now, and you're like, I don't like this anymore. But, like, one of his, like, famous ones was that he talked about, like, because he's a straight white man, he can go anywhere back in time and be totally fine. But he definitely doesn't want to go into the future because he thinks they have it coming. So,
yeah, it's like, I think the exception to all this, bizarrely, might be the Ice Age, because that the guy in the Ice Age past, because maybe it's a simpler time and because it's before everything got complicated.
Yeah, it's like, you got fire,
and
we could be chill.
It's before like prejudices probably developed, because he'd never really maybe seen anyone that was different to him, and it was just this like, oh, you've got fire and you seem to be kind, I'm going to share this heat with you. And it was almost this calming experience, which was very different to every other time period after that, which is savages or tribal sort of ideas, and then eventually into more recognizable kind of, just straight up, the clan in that kind of time period. So you've got all these things, and all of it is horrible. And I appreciate that too. It's and maybe part of that is also just like, again, appreciating, things aren't perfect yet, but appreciate the lives we have now, because it could definitely be worse.
Oh, definitely.
For
me
most.
too. For a woman.
Yes, I'm glad you specified. What you meant by that.
Yeah.
Just in case anyone would be confused.
Right. Which is why I only want to go to the future. I was thinking about it, like, where would I want to go if I can go into the past? If it's only 7 minutes, like, maybe I could just take anything. I wouldn't mind seeing, like, Uruk, like Mesopotamia.
If I could
See if
guarantee,
Gilgamesh was all he's cracked up to be.
if I could guarantee my safety, if I had like a bubble that would protect me from anything, then sure, I'd see a bunch of things from the past. Honestly, though, I mean, it'll be a boring answer. Just check some lottery numbers. Check some lottery numbers for, several big
so you
lottery
want,
days.
like 3 weeks ago.
And just give myself a note and say, hey, go and put these numbers on. go get a lottery ticket and pick these numbers.
I'd like to go back to about a year ago and invest in GameStop.
Oh, in that case, let's go back about, I don't know, 40 years and invest in Microsoft and maybe Google in the 90s or something. Like, I don't know. Google didn't exist till like 2002, what am I saying? But you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
these companies in their infancy before the booms.
Amazon.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, go back to 1996 and be like, yeah, I'll buy some shares in Amazon.
There's booksellers. Nobody reads books anymore.
Yeah, ain't going anywhere, is it? I'll take 50,000 shares, please. I don't know what that would have cost at the time, but
$3.
And what's that worth in 2021? Oh, 7 million. Oh, that's just nice.
You could buy a spot on Jeff Bezos' penis ship and go into space.
Yeah, there's something to be said about. I mean, I get that a rocket, the shape is designed because it's the most it's the shape that'll best, dare I say, penetrate the atmosphere. But
everything about that scenario, who's going, what it looks like, who he thanked for it afterward, is all one big FU to everybody.
Do you know what's so funny about it? Is that it looks more like a dick than the dick shuttle did in that Austin Powers movie that made all the jokes about it looking like a dick.
Right. Yeah.
The actual dick ship that Bezos had looked more like a penis than the joke in the Austin Powers movie. That is impressive.
Yep. Anyway, good movie. Should we rate it?
Yeah, I just want to add on one final note about this is the ultimate compensation. Guys who are fairly well off will buy a fancy car in their midlife crisis. Jeff Bezos builds a dick rocket. Anyway, yes, we should probably sum up and rate. It's a really good movie. I would recommend it. I think it's an interesting experimental film, which still has a couple of little rough edges, a couple of little moments of melodrama that go maybe a touch too far. But I think the direction is even more confident than The Endless. The way it kind of, and this is part of what was making me think it was doing some timey jumpy things early on, is the way it was like cutting between scenes where Anthony Mackie was sort of sitting there and it would cut to him in a different location. It felt like it was, maybe playing with things, but even without that, it still had a kind of a distinct style. And I think the
There's
inventiveness.
some really long takes also.
Yeah, there's a really nice moment when they go to their first crime scene. There's like a body in like the living room, and then there's a body in the kitchen, and there's like a sort of like a breakfast bar style setup, and the camera keeps kind of sort of like going between the two like sides of the scene, and it's just really nice. It's a really nice little. It has some energy to it that makes it feel like it's all part of one shared world, which is really cool. But like I said, the science fiction elements are so inventive. It still kind of has that indie spirit of like just like someone who's like, no, I've got fun ideas. I want to try different things with these science fiction concepts, and it still kind of has that spirit, even though it is a bit more. It's still low budget, relatively speaking, but it's it's got Anthony Mackie, it's got some known actors. It feels a little bit more polished, but it still has the spirit of their other films, which I think they should never lose. Honestly, I think it's what makes their films feel unique, and even if they do end up doing $100 million movie next. After they're done with Moon Knight, then I hope they keep that spirit in there because that's kind of what makes them feel a little bit different and special. It feels like they're going for like a a more accessible primer in terms of what their films feel like. At least this in The Endless, anyway.
Yeah, okay. I concur.
Any final thoughts and your rating, please?
I also enjoyed the film. I do think it's pretty good. And would recommend it. I'm definitely looking forward to Moon Knight just to see. I mean, this was always a curiosity to me because I wanted to see what they could do with a budget and with like, pretty great actors. And so I'll be curious to see what they do with a mega budget of Disney and Marvel money. That should be interesting. I'll look forward to the next thing they make after that too, probably. They're just, interesting filmmakers with their own definite style. Like at first I was like, oh, this is very different looking from The Endless. Like it looks like it's more money. But then like the music kicked in. I'm like, oh, they definitely got the same guy because now it sounds like The Endless. But that's good. Like I liked that. I like that it all feels like it's part of the same world. And maybe it is because they have 2 linking films already. Maybe they're all part of the same world. And yeah, so good job. I'm going to give it a 7.
I can confirm it's the same composer. I checked.
Yeah, I figured.
Also did Spring, so they definitely like working with Mr. Jimmy Lavelle. There's the composer. Actually, I quite like the music. Actually, I didn't really mention it when I was talking about the movie, but I do like the mood and vibe they like to go for. They definitely like going for that kind of ethereal, like wonderment.
Yeah, it makes sense when you're dealing with a drug that like it would be dreamlike.
Yeah, but Endless had that same vibe too. There's definitely got a vibe they like to go for, and even Spring did as well. And Spring, you can sort of see how that music that you've heard in those 2 movies would become just a little bit more romantic with just a slight twist, and all of a sudden you're like, oh. So yeah, movie's got heart, and it's got a lot of fun sci-fi concepts, and I think it's fairly well directed. I don't feel like it's their final form yet, but it feels like they're just about at their final form in terms of like really nailing like their hit. But I do think this is a really interesting film that's worth watching, and worth watching again, most likely. So I am going to I'm going to give it the 8. I'm going to give it the 8.
That's generous.
How dare you? You don't get to call my score generous. So it's like a backhanded backhanded critique, even. I mean to say, generous, so generous.
Well, it's okay. I know you like the indie art house stuff.
Just handing out the points like candy over here. I am very hard to please. You know this. I have been very severe on many other films. Don't mention it. I see it in your face. You want to mention the stars going to warp drive.
I guess I don't have to.
I saw you react, damn it. Just play
it's just, I don't know. It's only started doing this every, like in the last couple of weeks, and how do you not notice it?
What do I notice it? You play it cool. You let it slide off your
I'm
back
not a
like
good
that.
actress.
All right. That's our discussion of Synchronic. I would recommend it. So, let us know what you thought of the movie if you've seen it in the comments below. I'm going to get Tara to do her pose now for the thumbnail. So that should be fun. So 3, 2, 1, pause. Did anyone order
I'm such a pro.
the vanilla ice cream or the plain white bread? Or how many ways can I say that you just did the most generic smile for that ever?
I don't know. Maybe I should like wave or something.
Where was your fire? Where was the themes of the film coming out in your pose?
Yeah. I don't know, man. I don't know why you make me do it.
Because he didn't go on the thumbnail. It looks better with the two heads.
Well, okay. You can have the fire. Maybe put like a sword through my head or something. Or just put like a detached limbs above me.
Oh dear. Okay, this has been the Atomic Cinema Experiment. You can support us by liking, subscribing, dinging the bell for notifications. All those things help on YouTube. Tara's going to tell you all about Patreon after I thank our Patreon producers for the month. So thank you to Tyler Hess, Cindy Palacios, David Short, Board Now, Al Treisman, Christopher Moy, David Brown, and Stanley. Take it away, Tara.
Yeah, if you enjoyed the reviews, please check out our Patreon page. It's patreon.com/MouthfuzzTV. And if you donate as low as $1 per month, you will get bonus episodes of The Ace. You can check out all our favorite B movies are there. And that list will only continue to grow. So if you're looking for your favorite David Carradine films, maybe it's there. And if you donate $5 per month, you'll get access to these reviews one day early, and some shows you get a week early.
And you get
it could be worth it.
And you get to vote on an episode once a month.
Mm-hmm. Votes just went up for the next one.
They did. Yeah, a few days ago. Yeah, you can go vote. What are the 4 picks this month? Aliens. There are all movies with aliens in them. That's it. That was the
exciting.
That was the vote. Yes. So yeah, go have a look at Patreon. You can also get us on the Twitters at Screams Midnight. That is now the new Twitter home for all Male Fuzz movies related shows. So go check out that as well if you would like. But yeah, that's about it. So thank you very much for joining us. We always appreciate it. Keep watching science fiction and computer. That's Elsa.